It's the Peter Tilden Summit with special guest.
Hi. My name is Yakov Smirnoff. I am a comedian from Russia. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present Peter Tilden.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. My wife is sitting home listening to all the applause now going, yeah, they've been prompted. Talk Radio 790 KABC, Peter Tilden at 10 continues hour number 2. This is our big summit with Yakov Smirnoff, who has joined us. And we're broadcasting live from the Subaru Live Stage. Brought to you by the 2018 Subaru Forester, versatility that inspires. Dr. David Kipper has joined us.
Yeah.
I already saw people standing in line, dropping trow, showing him stuff. So, David, thank you very much. It's interesting having Yakov here. I've known Yakov for a long, long time, and his story is fascinating. Russia is in the news in a big way.
Yes.
And our attitude to Russia, it's interesting. For about 15, 20 years, our attitude about Russia was you. You were that safe Russian before the fall of the Soviet Union.
So it's all my fault?
Well, no, I mean, you were on television shows. You were in movies.
Yes.
Moscow on the Hudson with Robin Williams.
Yes.
You had your own television show. You did a Broadway show.
Yes.
And I think during the Cold War, you showed us this smiling, nice guy who was funny, and it really almost like was a PR campaign for the Soviet Union. And then after the Soviet Union fell apart and went kaputsky, you realized you were out of work.
I was.
And you kind of reinvented yourself. So we'll talk about that, but getting some insight.
Yes.
You were born in the Soviet Union, in Odessa.
Odessa, Ukraine.
And you lived in Ukraine in a one-bedroom apartment, basically.
Not even that. It's communal apartment, 9 families lived in one apartment. My mom, my dad, and I shared the bedroom till I was 26 years old. This is true.
No girls came over. No girls come home, I don't think?
Only mom, yeah. And when I was little, my parents wanted to be romantic, they would send me to look out the window. And then my dad would say, so what do you see in the window? I said, our neighbors being romantic.
Is that true?
Yeah. He said, how can you tell? I said, because their son is looking at me.
Oh, wow.
I was the only child because we had only one window.
Was that?
Yeah.
Was that a good? Do you remember growing up? Was that a good time for you, or was it an
I
oppressive
didn't know
time?
any better. We didn't have the information about free world, so it seemed like we had a little bit bigger room than our neighbors. So it seemed like we didn't have a car, we didn't have phone, we didn't have food. No toilet paper. I mean, but everybody lived like that, so we didn't have anything to compare.
And at any point, did you say, "Wait a minute, why are we living like this?" Where you got a sense of the outside world that maybe this isn't everybody?
Did later in life. I did. My dad initially started kind of listening to Voice of America, and they would jam the signal during daytime, but at nighttime they didn't. So my dad would get up in the middle of the night and he would listen to it, and he would tell us about it in the morning, and it kind of planted the seed about America and the Statue of Liberty, that here's this green lady waiting for people to come, and so I had this image as a child. But then I started doing comedy, and it was not normal for Americans to even imagine Russian comedian those days.
Right.
You know, it sounded like Mormon wino, you know. So, but we had comedians, and we just. So I became a successful comedian.
What could you as a comedian talk about there in a country that's that repressive and that controls everything? I remember you said there were 2 channels. On the one channel was the Russian television propaganda. On the second channel?
KGB officer tells you to turn back to channel 1.
So in that oppressive society, how do you know what the envelope is that you can push as far as
They tell you pretty much. You submit the material to Department of Jokes. And there's
a guy who comes home every day to his wife and says, "You should have seen the jokes today. What a day I had."
Kind of like. And each state had a Department of Jokes, part of Ministry of Culture, and then they would send it to big Department of Jokes, which is in Moscow, and then they approve it once a year, and you had to stay with the script for a year. So you could not improvise, you could not do anything different. So I was successful at that. If they tell you what envelope you can work in, it was a good training for me. I was clean, I was clever, and I had to go around those the red tape guys that to pass something by them that
Right.
the audience might get and they didn't get. So it would be like normal. And then I started working the cruise ships, and that's where I kind of met Americans and other people from free world. And I realized that they're happier overall because they had food. And so I came home and I said, Mom, Dad, we should go to America. My mom up to that point didn't want to go. She was scared. Dad was ready. And so eventually she agreed, and we all
All right, let me ask this. Talking to Yakov Smirnoff, we're here on the summit.
Yes.
Is it true that your family was able to leave and in exchange, it was a time where you could exchange families for wheat?
Jimmy Carter
Because
made
did they
a
hold,
deal
say,
with
2
them.
rye bread and you're out? I mean, how did they do that?
I think it was more than like a ton of wheat. I don't know exactly measurement, but Carter made a deal with them and said, if you want to show some human rights, we will give you some food, and we were exchanged for some tons of wheat. So every time I see a Wonder Bread truck, I salute.
So you come over here, you don't know English.
Don't know English.
And it's a great story. Why don't you tell the story? You came here and you didn't have the down deposit for an apartment in New York City.
Yeah. We looked for an apartment for a little while, and everything was expensive. And then finally we found a little place uptown New York, Washington Heights. And it was on 181st Street, where $240 a month rent at that time. And we only had $50. And this is when my parents and I, for the first time, kind of experienced American kindness. The lady who was the manager of that apartment building paid the difference out of her own pocket and gave us our first home in America. And I asked her, why did you do that? And she said, well, 80 years ago, my parents came to America, and someone helped them. So I guess that's what we do here. We help others less fortunate. And she told the tenants of that building that we just arrived. I remember that night, my dad is looking at the skyline of New York. And he said, son, look out the window. And my mom said, not tonight, I have a headache. and we hear the knock on the door. And at first we got scared because it could have been the KGB or even worse, the A1 lady, because they were trained by the KGB. Anyway, so we opened the door, and to I couldn't believe what I saw. Mrs. Lander was standing there smiling, and behind her, the whole hallway and the staircase going up and down was packed with the tenants of that building. They were holding things in their hands, and I'm thinking, people are so poor, they don't even have a place to set their things down. So I opened the door, and Mrs. Lander said, I'd like you to meet your neighbors. And these kind people kept rushing into our apartment, and they were handing us things, gifts, and I never met them before, and they were giving us food, furniture, clothing, pillows, blanket, dishes, things we did not have, desperately needed, and all they would say, welcome home. And I look at my parents, they had tears in their eyes, I had tears in my eyes. I never felt this before, and they were giving us things we didn't know what they were, like a waffle iron. I didn't know what it was. My mom didn't know what it was. She ruined 2 pairs of my pants. They gave us our first real American breakfast: English muffin, French toast, Canadian bacon, and Belgian waffle. They gave us bodybuilding shampoo. I remember that. Oh, my goodness.
It's pretty amazing, but how warm and loving is that was your introduction to America?
It totally embraced me. I immediately felt like I was home. That was great.
So from there,
Yes.
you ended up doing your comedy over here, which is tough. And I know one of the stories was that you did a cruise ship, and they fired you immediately.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, you were a headline on that cruise ship. How bad were you on a cruise?
I wasn't bad. I just didn't speak English, and it was, and they hired me as assistant of cruise director. It was Royal Caribbean, and I was in charge of the excursions. And I think there's still people in St. Thomas looking for a bus, you know. But they fired me a week after that, and then 5 years later they hired me and paid me like $25,000 just to be a headline.
Which is your work and your perseverance and doing it. And then you went on to play Vegas.
Yeah.
You went on to do the White House correspondence there. Is it
Yeah.
true that Reagan asked you how to deal with Gorbachev?
Yes,
He
very
did.
much.
He reached over and
did.
said,
Yeah.
"What do I do?"
Yeah, yeah. He said, how would you handle Gorbachev? And I'm looking around, I'm going, isn't there somebody more qualified than me?
You were the expert.
I
And
guess
so what
I
did you
was.
say?
I think
He likes to
I
have his
made a
forehead rubbed? What
joke.
do you-
I think I made a joke. I said, they're pretty. Those guys, you just need to show some respect. I mean, when Americans landed on the moon, Brezhnev called all the cosmonauts into his office, and Americans landed on the moon. We have to land in the sun. And they said, Comrade Brezhnev, we can't do that. We will burn up. He said, do you think I'm stupid? You land at night. So I made a joke, and then Reagan and I kind of developed a relationship that we would just get together sometimes and just brainstorm. And they used a lot of this stuff, like when the first meeting when they had in Moscow, he wanted to do a speech in front of all the politicians in Kremlin, and so they asked me to write jokes for his speech, right? And I'm thinking, if this doesn't work, I don't have any countries to go to. But I was honored, so I said yes, and they liked the jokes. And then they said, well, would you mind looking over the whole speech and seeing if that's the tone? And again, I'm like, going, I can't believe this is happening. But I did, and I said, I honestly didn't think that it was on the level that they're kind of looking down at Russia, and they don't like it that way. So, and they said, well, why don't you change the speech? And I did, and they liked the changes, and they kept it that way. And so
Isn't that amazing if we had some insight into that time? Like today, if you found out Andrew Dice Clay was working on Trump's speech, you know what I mean? And you found out a comedian was in control of the détente before you go over there. That's a pretty big responsibility. Before we break, and he's very interesting in the segue where we're going to go this morning, because he's also the comedian and the host of Happily Ever After. Or he went through a major career, and then, as so many of us did, a major divorce, which in your case blindsided you. And then you tried to find out what's happiness and why do our relations fall apart. But you did it in a very interesting way, because you studied with a guy who basically looks at the physiology and the neurology of this, the part, not just emotion, but where it comes from, the physiological part. So we're going to talk about that. So if anybody here is in a happy relationship, leave now. No one got up. No one got up. And it's fascinating you went there, but before we take a break.
They wouldn't be here, Peter,
That's
if
true.
they had a happy relationship.
That's like guys who go ice fishing. You know ice fishing?
Yeah.
How unhappy do you have to be that you're actually convincing the family that is a sport? I'm sitting in the middle of a frozen lake, and I'm drilling a hole in the ice, and I'm sitting by myself in 20 degrees below because I love my family. I don't think so. I think we got a problem there. But how did you decide to go to Branson? So your career kind of starts curtailing.
Yes.
How do you get up one morning and go, I'm going to Branson, I'm Russian, and I'm going to Branson, Missouri?
It was emergency landing, because when the Soviet Union collapsed, Letterman on that night had a top 10 list of things that now will change, that the Soviet Union no longer there, and I made number 1 on the list. Yakov Smirnoff will be out of work. Wow. And I thought it was funny too, right? And 6 months later, it wasn't funny, because all my contracts in Vegas, Atlantic City, disappeared. Nobody hired me anymore. And so I'm living in Pacific Palisades, and we just bought a home, 2 little kids, and I'm going, what do I do? So I started looking around, and I did Farm Aid with Willie Nelson. And my agent had to convince me to do it, because I said, nobody will know me in the middle of America. Well, I walked on stage, and they gave me a standing ovation. It was like 40,000 people. I'm going, oh, I guess they've seen me somewhere, maybe on television, whatever. And Willie Nelson at that time used to play in Vegas. And so he said, you should go. No, he said, you should go to Branson, and that's
So
how
a stone 70-year-old is the one who determined your career.
helped me make a choice. Yes.
Amazing. And I know in the beginning, 12 people showed up, 30 people. And then
Exactly.
eventually, the man ended up playing to over 4 million people in Branson, Missouri. And
Yeah.
he kept it. And did you like it there? Your kids grew up there?
I did like it. It was a great place to raise kids. It was a blessing in disguise. More than that, it helped me transition because my divorce also happened there, and I started questioning why is it happening to me and other people, and that's what opened a whole different relationship because I used to help end the Cold War in the war room. Now I'm trying to end the Cold War in the bedroom.
Yeah, different issue.
Very different.
We're gonna, if you want to call and talk to Yakov or get a question, 800-222-5222. Same with anybody in the audience here who has a question. Feel free. We're going to come back and do that. I also want somebody who will do a quiz with us. What I'm going to do is test Yakov's knowledge of Russia. I will ask him the question.
Oh, boy.
You'll say he's right or wrong, and I've got a great prize. Tickets to go see Jake Owen at the Greek Theater,
Wow.
September 20. Big star. So we'll do that when we come back. We've got some other surprises too, and I do want to talk about the relationship stuff because it is. I watched your PBS special, Happily Ever Laughter, and the funniest part of that special, if I got it right, you talk about the emotional needs of women as opposed to the emotional needs of men.
Yes.
What women need is affection, conversation, and
Openness and honesty.
men need
Sexual.
physical intimacy
Yes.
and a recreational companion, meaning, you want to go to the ball game with me? So you get to see there's a huge disconnect between what men want and what women want.
Very much.
So we'll talk about that when we come back. We are live, broadcasting from Subaru Live Stage, brought to you by the 2018 Subaru Forester, versatility that inspires, and we'll be back right after this. Talk Radio 790 KABC, Peter Tilden at 10, hour number 2, broadcasting live at our summit. Dr. Kipper, I see, is giving free medical help to people. You want to come here, drop trowel, Yakov, and we can take a look? Everything all right?
I'm good. But if you have gloves, then we can have a little checkup.
He always has gloves.
Streaming.
He always has gloves.
Yeah.
So before, we're at a short segment here,
Yes.
and when we come back, sir, I want to do the quiz with you. We'll take some calls, 800-222-5222, and I want to talk about some relationship stuff. But what's going on with the Soviet Union, with Russia today? I just wanted to get your take. You've been back. You go back periodically.
I have.
So what is your sense of, again, real quick, if you could sum up, A, what the Russian people think about us, knowing that they're restricted in what they hear, and number 2, how we're dealing with Russia. Because the average person doesn't know how to move this forward. By the way, the last 3 presidents didn't know how to move this forward. So,
Well, when you go there, they definitely have a humorous look on what's happening in the United States because they're saying you're blaming us for your election. And we had nothing to do with it. That's their take on this. And they're saying Hillary had challenges with her emails. She got in trouble for using her personal server. And you think about it, Bill Clinton got in trouble for exactly the same thing.
okay. Thank you
So,
very much.
yeah, you're welcome. So there, when he said I didn't have sexual relations with that woman, he meant Hillary. That's
So are we
Those
on the
are-
road to something here? Are we?
I think-
Can you get a relationship with Putin, or can you? And this is a former KGB guy.
Yes.
And everybody's out for their own deal and their own benefit. So,
absolutely. And they're, if you look at them, you can tell. I mean, Putin's hair receding like Russian economy, and Donald Trump's hair like America. One side doesn't get along with another.
Talk Radio 790 KBC. We'll be back. Talk Radio 790
I gotta tell
KBC.
you.
We're broadcasting live from the Subaru Live Stage, brought to you by the 2018 Subaru Forester, versatility that inspires. It's such a lovely language. It always sounds like you're trying to get up something that was in your, you know what I mean?
There was
Right?
something in your throat.
Is there actually a
yes.
word that just, is that a word?
No,
Okay, thank you.
but yeah, it's a sound. I just want to compliment. I got to tell you, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to be able to talk to people on the air with such ease and trusting yourself so much
Oh, thank
that you can have this wonderful
thank you
flow.
very much.
How
Very
about
easy. Well,
a
no,
round of applause?
It's very
Great
easy.
job.
You make it very easy. I said that we're going to do a quiz real quick to
Not
see if
easy,
you know
not easy.
if you know more about Russia than this gentleman does. So, sir, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask him a question. You either agree with them or not. You get most of them right, you're going to go see Jake Owen. Okay? So here we go. What's your name, sir?
Alan Weiss.
That's correct. Is that right, Yakov? Is he right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how we start. So here we go.
Okay, so
Here are a couple
I'm
quick
winning.
questions.
Am I winning already?
Traffic in Moscow is so bad that wealthy Russians actually hire fake ambulances to beat traffic jams. Is that true or false, Yakov?
True.
Sir?
True.
Absolutely true. Russia is so big, it has 20 time zones, 16 time zones, or 9 time zones. Do you know which, Yakov?
9.
What do you say, Al?
True.
That's exactly correct. Mikhail Gorbachev recorded an album of romantic ballads, and Vladimir Putin has a judo DVD. Is that true or false, Yakov?
Judah DVD, yes. Not romantic ballads from Gorbachev.
You sure?
No? Okay, not sure.
Yes or no? Say yes or no.
Yes, it's true.
No.
Alan, it's true.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, my middle child was conceived to the Gorbachev album. It's unbelievable. Legend has it that Russians chose Christianity over Islam back in 988 AD in part because they didn't want to give up alcohol. True or false?
True.
Sir?
True.
You just got yourself some tickets to the Jake Owen concert.
Thanks, man.
September 28th. So I guess you do. And you do go back to Russia, and
Thanks,
are you well received at this point?
I don't perform there. I just go to get some new material. Honestly, I was there on May Day, right? And they have this big parade with missiles. And when you're standing close, you realize those are old Soviet missiles, painted new, but they're still rusting and stuff. And the technology is so old and so outdated. When they shoot a missile, then they have to go watch CNN to see where it landed.
Amazing. And are you recognized there? Do people know who you are?
Not really. And
Not
I
so
don't
much?
really want to be recognized there. No.
I understand. What did
No.
what was the Bud Light commercial? With Bud Light, you find a
Miller
party?
Lite,
Miller Lite.
In
Go ahead.
America, you can always find a party. In Russia, party always finds you.
There you go. So what Yakov did after Branson, he ran its course there, and then you ended up going to the alma mater of Trump. You went to University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
You started to take courses after your divorce about relationships
Yes.
and about more of the science of relationship.
Correct.
Because you felt what happiness comes first and then love.
Correct.
And why aren't people happier?
Right.
Because
and
we don't. Yeah.
laughter, actually, that's what guided me for this exploration is that in the beginning of the relationship, there's a lot, I remember a lot of laughter during the honeymoon stage, a lot of laughter. And then in the end, when you have a divorce going on, the only people who are laughing are the attorneys. And so I said, well, there was a time span where the laughter disappeared. And then I started asking the audience, and I asked over 4.5 million people, how many of you how many remember laughter during that honeymoon stage? And everybody applauds. And then I say, how many of you would go on a date if you didn't have laughter on the first date? Silence. So that gave me, it's like a gauge, and I realized that gauge is happening to everyone, and we're just not using it. So that inspired me to explore and say, well, where does the laughter come from? Why? Because sense of humor does not change.
Right.
But something changes, and I realized it was the needs, what you listed out. It was the needs of people that are not being met. We meet them during the honeymoon stage because we want to get the girl. Then it's like, get the remote control. And the girl will put on, nice little black dress, high heels, and then after a while, she wears house slippers and a t-shirt, I'm with stupid. That's what happens. It happens, the science is proving that it happens in about a year for everybody. a year. The hormones are all raging. We know what to do, both sides, and then Mother Nature says, well, that was free introductory offer, now you have to pay full price. And we start, and we don't know what to do.
Well, what's interesting, we'll continue this conversation when we come back, isn't it about the conversation that you start pulling inward, you start not communicating as much, and I noticed this, and I used to joke about it, that if you go on vacation, they have cruise directors to keep you busy. They have guys at resorts to keep you busy,
Yeah.
because if you're not, and you see guys with little spindly legs who have never done anything athletic, they're parasailing, they're swimming with the sharks. These are guys who wouldn't take a risk back home. They'd rather get eaten by a shark than spend an hour with their wife with nothing to do, because something is going to come up that they don't want to talk about, because guys don't want to communicate.
Right.
It's going to come up, I want another kid, we're having financial problems, I don't like the way you're a friend, blah, blah. Something not good is going to come up, and you got to go, oh, you know what, I'd love to talk about that, but I got to feed a shark now underwater and then parasail. So it's almost an avoidance behavior, and the gap keeps getting further and further and further.
Exactly.
So how do you, we'll find out, we'll talk about how you reel that in.
Yes.
And how you bring that back,
Yes.
and successfully, if you can bring that back. I know you've talked about this a lot, and by the way, the special, he's a comedian and host of Happily Ever Laughter. His Twitter's at Yakov Smirnoff, and the website is yakov.com, and the special is on YouTube, and it is wonderful.
And it's on PBS as well. And tomorrow night, if you want to see me at the Comedy Store, that's I'm there in the main room. So Friday night,
Great.
7:30 show.
And if you don't want to see him, he's still there.
I'm
He's
still
still going to be at the comedy
I'll
store.
be there no matter
And
what.
I congratulate him. He's in a new relationship now.
Yes,
And you'll use
I'm
all the stuff that you
engaged.
know, or the
Yes,
alarms will go off.
Totally. It was interesting that we were coming to that to that top of the hill on different sides. She went through divorce, I went through divorce, and both of us said, why did it happen? And she was studying on her end, and I was studying on my end, and now we're using it every day. All of this knowledge that came out, and it's sustainable when you know what's going on.
So let's go out on this statistic, if it's right. It's from
Sure.
you. We sleep 7.2 hours. We work 8.5 hours a day. We watch TV 2.4 hours a day. And as far as intimacy, which is hugging or kissing or cuddling or foreplay or sex itself, before 2015, it was 1 minute a day, average. And now-
American.
American. Now it's to 36 seconds
That's
a day.
correct.
And I got to say to you, I don't think it's that long.
Ah!
But is that true? 36 seconds a day if you
on
average
the
it out?
average, yes, on the average, Americans are really not connecting. We're watching TV or we're doing some other stuff, but we're not hugging, kissing, and and if you're doing it more than 36 seconds, then you're using somebody's minutes.
Yeah. Is it like the environment? I can buy some minutes from you? Okay, we'll
I
talk
bet you
about that.
can.
All right, Talk Radio 790 KBC. We'll be back, broadcasting live from the Subaru Live Stage with Yakov Smirnoff. Dr. Kipper is here. David, raise your hand. Say hi. He's so clean, isn't he? And we'll be right back. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Yakov, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Food, by the way, I would like to thank the following partners for today's broadcast: a Truck Stop for approving us all with the delicious lunch we're about to enjoy, and ABK Beers and Hint Water for the awesome refreshments. Thank you. And of course, Subaru for presenting the sponsor of the Subaru Live Stage. So thank you. Yakov, thank you for coming in. I got to ask you, when you go back to Russia, what's the question that people ask you there about the United States? What do they want to know?
They want to know what Americans think of the Russians, just as Russians want to think of Americans. And they're fascinated, like my relatives there who are still there, they don't really understand capitalism. It's not natural for them. So when they come to America, they had an opportunity to move here, but they said, it's too hard. I mean, you have to take responsibility for who you are. And they're not trained to do that. So they rather take a pension of, $50 a month.
Because it's a sure thing.
It's a sure thing.
Wow. And this is a country where, and I didn't get to ask this during the trivia question, but during the 2012 election, when Putin was elected for a third term, one region actually registered a voting turnout of 146%.
It's close to reality. I mean, he has like 98% approval rating. The other 2% are dead. So it adds up to 100. So
But
we're close.
supposedly he's one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's taken billions of dollars out of the country.
Yeah, who's going to tell
There
him
you
not
go.
to do that?
With about 2 minutes left, Dice Clay was your roommate for a while?
Yes, yes.
What was that like? Was he that guy?
Well, he taught me English, and I knew all the nursery rhymes. So he wasn't that guy that we saw on HBO, and then later on became huge. When I met him, when we lived in for 3 years together, he was doing more impressions of like John Travolta or. Sylvester Stallone. So he was pretty clean.
He was trying to find his
Yeah,
thing.
and then when HBO approached him and he did Young Comedian special, Rodney Dangerfield's, then he did that piece about nursery rhymes, and all of a sudden, it just blew up. And then after that, he would sell out Madison Square Garden like an hour. I mean, it was crazy.
But that's an act. People don't get that. That was an act
It
that he built.
is an act. He's a nice guy. I like him a lot. We are good friends. So yeah.
One of the funny things that just popped up was when you're talking about how you got out of the Soviet Union at the time. It's a story that your dad went into the kitchen and he took a coffee can. You want to tell that story?
Yeah. Well, Mom was, as I said earlier, Mom was against going to Russia, to America. And Mom was the main breadwinner, and Dad was an inventor that never really sold anything. So when I came home and I said, Mom, Dad, we should go to America, Mom looked at my dad like, if looks could kill, he'd be dead. And he said, look, now Yakov is on your side. And so he said, but even if the Soviet government allows us to get out, how could we do that? And this is when my dad gave us a surprise of a lifetime. He got up from the table, went to the kitchen cupboard, got a coffee can that was hidden back there, opened the coffee can, and inside there was money, like rolls and rolls of money. And my mom and I are staring in disbelief and in shock. My mom said, where in the world did you get coffee? And where all this money coming from, right? And I guess, my dad finally invented something that was successful. He invented a device that tested the integrity of concrete. So the Soviets didn't give him enough money, but they gave him just enough to buy 3 airline tickets to go
Amazing.
to America. And that's how we
Here
got
we
out.
are.
Yeah.
But I love the answer. Where do you get the coffee? Talk Radio 790 KABC. We'll be right back. Thank you, guys. By the way, thank you all for showing up. I know a lot of you fled from Orange County and lots of other places, so thank everybody for coming out. And it's brilliant doing this in the Subaru Live studio. Yakov, continued success, man.
Thank you so
I love
much.
that you were handed an opportunity and you keep reinventing yourself. And
Thank you.
even when you're knocked down, you come back bigger and more spectacular. So we
Thank
look
you.
forward to having you back again. Thanks for coming and making the summit so successful.
Thank you.
And thank you, KBC. Thank you to all the engineers to make it so that people could actually hear us broadcasting out there, and producer Joe and Dino back to the studio, and Steve, the engineer. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. And Dr. Kipper, of course, who keeps us all healthy and well, and he's a handsome and powerful man. Talk Radio 790 KBC.